Okay, so let's talk about Singapore. It's one of the most successful countries on Earth, a real powerhouse. But it's facing a quiet crisis, one that could threaten its entire future. Not enough babies are being born. And in this explainer, we're going to unpack why that is. And believe me, the reasons go way deeper than you might think.
Look at this number, 0.97. That's the number that has policymakers in Singapore seriously worried. It's the country's total fertility rate from 2023, a record low. Now, what does that even mean? Well, to put it in perspective, a country needs a rate of 2.1 just to keep its population stable. So yeah, 0.97 is a big deal.
This quote, wow, it just nails the heart of the issue, doesn't it? The idea here is that Singapore's incredible success has created a society of super yachts, people with these incredibly high standards and expectations. And those super yachts just can't find a way to connect with the more traditional sampans. This metaphor perfectly sets the stage for the social puzzles we're about to solve.
So, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to look at just how serious this threat is. Then, we'll dive into two really fascinating social paradoxes, something called the maiden gap and the perfect child problem. After that, we'll take a little jump into the future to see how new technology could make things even trickier. And finally, we'll talk about what really needs to change. So, why is this such a big deal? I mean, it's just a number, right? Well, for a country like Singapore, it's a huge deal. A shrinking population is basically an existential threat. You're talking about a smaller workforce, an older society that's harder to care for, and some really tough questions about the nation's future on the world stage. Now, when you hear about this, your mind probably jumps to the usual suspects, right? The high cost of living, those crazy demanding jobs, and yeah, those are definitely part of it. But they are not the real story. The real driver, what's truly behind this, is cultural. It's about societal expectations for the perfect partner and the perfect child becoming so impossibly high that people are just opting out.
And that leads us straight to our first major paradox, and it's a direct result of Singapore's amazing success. It's called the mating gap, and it shows how progress can create a really fascinating and difficult social problem.
Okay, so to really get the mating gap, we've got to talk about this one sociological concept, female hypergamy. Now, this isn't about judging anyone, okay? It's just a pattern that researchers have seen across many cultures. Women often tend to look for partners who have a similar or higher level of education and income.
So you have that tendency. Now, let's look at what's actually happening on the ground in Singapore today. Women are crushing it in higher education. I mean, look at these numbers. 64% of young women have a university degree compared to just 56% of men. So what happens when you put those two things together? You get a demographic bottleneck. It's a completely unintended consequence of success. If the cultural expectation to marry up is still there, but you have more women than men at the top of the educational ladder, well, you get a fundamental mismatch. You have this growing group of highly successful women and a shrinking pool of men who meet those traditional standards. And that pressure for perfection, it doesn't stop once you find a partner. Oh no, it gets even more intense when it comes to parenting. And this brings us to our second big paradox. The quest to raise the so-called perfect child is ironically a huge reason why people are having fewer of them.
To really get this, you need to understand one word, kiasu. It literally means afraid to lose. But it's so much more than that. It's this deep-seated, all-consuming, hyper-competitive mindset that shapes so much of the culture. It's the drive to make sure your child is always ahead of the pack.
And this isn't just some abstract idea. It affects real life every single day. We're talking about parents making massive financial sacrifices, buying a super expensive apartment just to be in the right school district, or spending a huge chunk of their income on private tutors. Your child's success becomes all about family honor, and the fear of losing face is huge. So when parenting feels like this high-stakes, all-consuming marathon, well, you can see why the idea of running it 2 or 3 times is just completely overwhelming.
Okay, so if you think the pressure is intense now, just imagine what happens when technology gives you the tools to literally design your kids for success. This is where things get a little sci-fi. We're going to pivot to the future and look at something that could be like pouring gasoline on this whole fire, reprogenetic technologies. And I know this sounds like something out of a movie, but it's not. This is real technology that is right on the horizon. So just imagine, you're in a society that is already defined by that kiasu mindset. The temptation to give your child any possible advantage, even a genetic one, would be almost impossible to resist. So there are basically 2 main ways this tech could go down. The first is called polygenic embryo screening. Think of it like a genetic draft. You create a few embryos through IVF, and then you pick the one with the best genetic hand for things like intelligence. The second method, gene editing, is way more direct. You're not just picking the best of the bunch, you're actually going into the DNA and rewriting the code to enhance certain traits.
So what's the problem with this? Well, there's this brilliant concept from evolutionary biology called the Red Queen effect. It actually comes from Alice in Wonderland, where the queen tells Alice she has to run as fast as she can just to stay in the same place. If every parent starts genetically boosting their kids for intelligence, guess what happens? The average just goes up. Nobody gains a real advantage. The competition just gets fiercer, and you're all stuck in an endless and very expensive arms race.
Now you might be thinking, okay, but won't this stuff get cheaper over time like an iPhone? Well, probably not. And the source here uses a perfect analogy. Think less smartphone and more dental implant. This isn't a mass-produced gadget. It's a complex, personalized medical procedure that requires a doctor's time and expertise. And because of that, the cost is likely going to stay high, making it a luxury item. And this brings us to the ultimate crazy irony of it all. The very technology that promises the perfect child could become the #1 reason to have only one. If it costs a fortune, many parents might decide to pour all their resources into a single, genetically superior child instead of having a larger, unenhanced family. It could actually drive the birth rate down even further.
So, where does that leave us? Government policies aren't the whole answer, and we've just seen how futuristic technology could even make the problem worse. So, what is the ultimate solution?
At the end of the day, the core issue isn't something a government check can fix. The only real solution is a deep societal shift in mindset. It means tackling these cultural pressures head-on. It means redefining what success looks like, easing up on the relentless academic race, and changing our crazy expectations for what a perfect partner or a perfect life really is.
And that's the big, provocative question we're left with. This whole thing is about so much more than demographics. It's about our values. In this relentless quest for the perfect partner, the perfect student, and maybe soon, the genetically perfect baby, what are we sacrificing along the way? What kind of society are we really building? That's a question every hyper-competitive society is going to have to answer.